Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Mohammed Layiq Sediqi, the father of Holophase. Remember the language we are learning together. There is one field, phi, the holophase, one continuous cyclic movement from which all of reality unfolds. When phi begins to change, its first derivatives appear, and with them, the three dimensions show themselves at once: time as omega, space as k, and motion as v, built from both. Every higher derivative is a finer question about how phi changes, and each one casts three shadows together: a time shadow, a space shadow, and a motion shadow. These echoes mix and weave into one another, forming the patterns we call fields, particles, bodies, thoughts, and worlds. In this picture, everything that exists is a living tapestry of phi, endlessly echoing through its derivatives and their dimensional shadows. Today, we listen to just one of those echoes. Our ascent through the language of identity continues. We have climbed from the root of the single field phi through the core alphabet of its change, omega in time, k in space, v in motion. We have seen how these letters form stable words, the identities that endure. We have already explored two of the three essential phases of identity. First, the temporal fingerprint, the rhythm that makes a thing itself through time. Second, the spatial signature, the shape that makes it itself in space. Now we reach the third phase, the one that weaves the other two together. We ask a simple but profound question: how does a thing journey? How does it carry its rhythm and its shape through the world? Today, we step into identity in motion, what we call propagation identity or motion semanticity. This is where we learn that how you move is not just something you do, it is part of who you are. How a pattern of phi propagates is part of its meaning. Let us begin with what we can call the paradox of the traveling self. Imagine a flock of starlings at dusk, a murmuration. Thousands of birds move as a single, fluid, shape-shifting cloud. The flock has a clear identity. We can point and say, there it is. But this identity is not defined by which specific birds are inside it, because birds are constantly joining and leaving the edges. It is not defined by one fixed shape, because the cloud expands, contracts, and twists into new forms from moment to moment. It is also not defined by staying in one place, because the whole flock sweeps across the sky. So what defines it? The identity of the flock is its characteristic way of moving. The fluid coordination, the smooth propagation of turns, the collective intelligence encoded in its flight path. Its identity lives in its motion pattern. In the holophase view, every moving identity is a kind of murmuration in the field of phi. Its persistence is not just a stable rhythm or a stable shape, but a stable pattern of propagation. A planet is not merely a ball that exists for billions of years. It is a ball that orbits in a very specific way. That orbit, that repeated journey, is part of its motion identity. To have a propagation identity is to have a characteristic kinematic handwriting, a recognizable way of transporting your temporal and spatial patterns through the world. Every moving identity leaves this kinematic handwriting in the fabric of phi. This handwriting is its unique style of journeying, written in the language of motion and its derivatives. The first stroke of this handwriting is velocity, v. Velocity asks, where are you going and how fast? It is the basic intent of motion. A beam of light has a velocity that, in a vacuum, is always the same, the famous speed of light. A glacier has a velocity measured in centimeters per year. The pattern of constancy or variation in v is the first letter of motion identity. The second stroke is acceleration. Acceleration asks whether your speed or direction is changing. It tells us whether you are being pushed or pulled. A comet in a highly elliptical orbit has a characteristic acceleration pattern. Far from the sun, its acceleration is small. As it swings close, it speeds up dramatically, then slows again as it recedes. A bouncing ball has a rhythmic acceleration pattern. Gravity pulls it down. The impact with the ground suddenly reverses its velocity. Then gravity slows the upward motion until it stops and falls again. This rhythmic change is part of the identity of a bouncing ball under gravity. The third stroke is jerk, the rate of change of acceleration. Jerk asks whether the change in acceleration is smooth or sudden, gentle or harsh. You feel jerk when a car starts suddenly or brakes sharply. A smooth train has low jerk. You barely feel changes in speed. An old bus with rough gear changes has high jerk. Your body lurches. The jerk profile of a motion is part of the felt character of that motion. It is part of how a journey feels from the inside. Alongside these, the curvature of the path tells us how sharply the motion bends. A child on a merry-go-round follows a path of constant curvature, always turning in a circle. A ball thrown in the air follows a gentle parabolic curve under gravity. A spacecraft carrying out a gravity assist around the planet follows a hyperbolic path. Each of these trajectories has its own curvature pattern, another stroke of the motion handwriting. Above all of these sit higher motion derivatives, which capture finer nuances. They tell us about the smoothness of a dancer's turn, the tiny vibration in an engine's movement, the microscopic jitter in a particle's path. Together, all of these form the kinematic handwriting of an identity. In the language of everyday speech, this handwriting is the verb and the adverb of the story. It tells us what the thing does and how it does it. We can see this clearly in concrete examples. Think of Halley's Comet. It is not identified by its icy composition alone. Many objects are made of ice and rock. Halley's Comet is identified by its 76-year elliptical orbit around the Sun. That orbit, with its precise closest and farthest points and its characteristic timing, is its kinematic handwriting. If some enormous impact threw the comet into a very different orbit, then, in the deep sense of its motion identity, Halley's Comet would be gone, even if the physical nucleus still existed. Another example is a soliton, a solitary wave that travels through a medium without changing its shape. The famous Severn bore, a tidal wave that runs up a river in the United Kingdom, is one such phenomenon. A soliton is a shape that moves without dispersing. Its spatial signature, its hump of water, and its motion identity, its speed, are locked together by the nonlinear grammar of the medium's equations. The soliton is this self-reinforcing package of shape and speed. Two solitons can even collide and pass through one another, emerging with their shape and speed essentially unchanged. Their motion identities survive the encounter. Consider a migratory bird, such as the Arctic tern. Its identity is not only its body shape and genetic code, but also its astonishing annual journey from one pole of the Earth to the other and back. This is not random wandering. It is a specific, learned, and inherited flight path, a kinematic signature etched into its behavior. The journey itself is part of what it means to be an Arctic tern. Even light has propagation identity. A single photon of red light has a propagation identity defined by moving at speed c in a vacuum. But a pulse of light, a little packet of many waves together, has a richer motion identity. It has what physicists call a group velocity, the speed at which the envelope of the pulse moves. In some media, this pulse can spread out and change shape as it travels. Its motion identity is one of dispersing. In carefully arranged optical fibers, we can create optical solitons, light pulses whose shape and speed remain fixed over long distances. Again, a specific motion identity has been engineered and protected by the grammar of the medium. We can now ask an important question. When does a journey remain the same, and when does it become a different journey? Some changes preserve motion identity because they respect the underlying pattern of derivatives. Imagine watching a ball roll down the aisle of a moving train. To a person sitting inside the train, the ball simply rolls along the aisle. To a person standing on the platform, the ball follows a diagonal path, combining the motion of the train and the motion of the ball. The core kinematic handwriting relative to the train, the way the ball rolls along the aisle, is unchanged. Motion identity is often frame relative. It is the pattern of motion with respect to a chosen context that matters. We can also stretch or compress the timescale of motion while preserving its basic identity. If you play a video of a galloping horse in slow motion, the velocities and accelerations are smaller, but the relationships between them are preserved. The characteristic sequence of leg movements, the timing of pushes and lifts, the rhythm of the gait, all remain. We still recognize the motion as a gallop. The pattern type of the journey is unchanged. Similarly, we can scale the spatial size of a trajectory. Two planets in circular orbits, one large and one small, both share the same motion identity of uniform circular motion. The radii differ and the speeds may differ, but the grammatical relationship between velocity, acceleration, and curvature is the same. The identity is in the form of the motion, not in its absolute size. Other changes break motion identity. If the rules of the medium change, the kinematic handwriting may no longer be supported. A water soliton traveling from deep water into very shallow water may lose its self-reinforcing structure and break apart. The locked relationship between shape and speed is destroyed. Likewise, a smooth laminar fluid flow has a clear motion identity, layers of fluid sliding past each other in an orderly way. If the flow speed increases past the threshold, the motion can become turbulent. Then the clear pattern shatters into swirling eddies and vortexes. The identity laminar flow is gone. A satellite in a stable orbit around Earth has one motion identity. If its engines fire and give it enough speed to escape Earth's gravity, its trajectory changes from a closed loop to an open path. It no longer orbits, it departs. The change in trajectory type marks a change in motion identity. The story of the journey has switched to a different genre. Propagation identity is the dynamic synthesis of the other two echoes of identity. It is how time and space converse. The motion echo is the journey itself, the stable pattern of velocity, acceleration, jerk, and path curvature that defines how an identity travels. The time echo is the rhythm of the journey, the way this pattern unfolds in time. Halley's Comet's 76-year period is as much part of its identity as the shape of its orbit. The space echo is the path of the journey, the shape traced out in space. The orbit is an ellipse. The path of a migrating bird is a curve on the globe. The route of a commuter is a repeated line on a map. In this way, propagation identity is the temporal rhythm of a spatial pattern as it translates. It is the verb that connects the noun, the shape, to the narrative, the unfolding in time. It is the bridge that ties together what something is and how it persists, by describing how it moves. Within the master tree of the Holophase language, propagation identity lives in the identity tower beside temporal identity and spatial identity. It depends equally on everything we have learned about temporal nuance, the fine structure of rhythms and rates of change, and everything we have learned about spatial nuance, the fine structure of shapes and gradients. Its role is to ask which stable patterns in the combined space of V, omega, and K count as persistent ways of moving. It feeds directly into the capstone of this book, where we see how deeper stability rules weave all three pillars of identity into one coherent structure. Propagation identity is tied to many neighboring concepts in the Holophase program. It is always grounded in phi because it is simply a specific and stable way that the phi pattern transports itself through the field. It depends on velocity, acceleration, and jerk because these are the primary letters of the motion handwriting. It is constrained by the chains of equations that link omega, k, and v, such as dispersion relations for waves or equations of motion for particles. The motion identity is not free to be anything, it must obey the grammar of the medium. For a wave, the group velocity is determined by the way omega depends on k. For a planet, the orbit is determined by the gravitational balance encoded in the action. Propagation identity also connects deeply to the idea of falsifiability. The Holophase view says that moving identities have kinematic handwritings that obey specific constraint chains. This means we can test the theory. If we claim that a particular kind of object has a certain motion identity, then its observed trajectory and its derivatives should match the patterns allowed by the governing grammar. If they do not, either we have misunderstood the identity or our description of the grammar is wrong. You can see this in the case of gravitational waves, ripples in spacetime produced by merging black holes. Detectors such as LIGO record very faint signals when such an event occurs. The signal is not just a random blip, it has a specific shape in time, often called a chirp. As the black holes spiral inward, the frequency and amplitude of the wave increase in a predictable way, then shut off sharply at the merger. This chirp is the motion identity of that inspiraling system, written in the language of time and motion. Physicists compare the observed chirp to predictions from Einstein's equations. When they line up, they say, this is a binary black hole merger of such and such masses. The match between observed and predicted kinematic handwriting is how the event is identified. If you want to see the full mathematical derivations and exact equations that sit behind these stories, you can search for the word Holophase on Zenodo. There you will find the scientific papers that this audio journey is built on, written in the formal language of mathematics. The claim that motion identities exist would be falsified if we could find a fundamental, agreed-upon moving entity whose trajectory, when measured with perfect precision, showed no consistency with any stable derivative pattern or constraint chain. So far, from quantum particles to planets, from waves in water to waves in spacetime, motion always seems to obey grammars. Stable motion is stable grammar made visible. The universe is full of characteristic journeys. In physics, the planetary orbits of our solar system form a remarkable motion identity. Nearly coplanar, nearly circular orbits with specific periods. This pattern has persisted for billions of years. In superconductors, electrons move in pairs in a way that allows current to flow without resistance. This resistless flow is a collective motion identity of the electron fluid. When the temperature rises above a critical value, this identity is lost, and the electrons return to ordinary resistive motion. In chemistry, reaction diffusion fronts in certain chemical systems propagate through a medium with a specific constant speed. This speed and the shape of the front form the motion identity of that reaction. Brownian motion, the jittery wandering of tiny particles suspended in a fluid, has a statistical motion identity. The average square distance from the starting point grows linearly with time. This pattern is the fingerprint of diffusion. In biology, the different gaits of animals, such as a horse's walk, trot, canter, and gallop, are distinct motion identities. Each gait is a specific, stable coordination pattern of limb movements, with characteristic velocities and accelerations. The animal can switch between these stable motion words depending on speed and need. Action potentials in nerves are traveling waves of electrical change along an axon. Their motion identity is a nearly constant propagation speed for a given neuron type. This reliable speed is crucial for the timing of signals in the nervous system. In geology, tectonic plates move across the surface of the Earth at a few centimeters per year. The slow, steady drift of the Pacific plate, for example, is a motion identity that, over millions of years, builds mountain ranges, opens oceans, and fuels earthquakes and volcanoes. In human physiology, your own gait as you walk down a street is a personal kinematic handwriting. The length of your stride, the timing of your steps, the swing of your arms, all form a pattern so distinctive that cameras and algorithms can use it to recognize you. We humans constantly create and respond to motion identities. In sports and dance, much of the art is about refining particular motion patterns. A tennis serve or a golf swing is not just hitting a ball. It is a carefully trained sequence of accelerations and rotations repeated with remarkable consistency. Different dance styles, from the waltz to breakdancing, are defined by characteristic vocabularies of motion identity. We can recognize the style even if the dancer is a silhouette. In technology, digital communication protocols use specific sequences of signals to establish connections. These sequences are motion identities in the space of information states. Control engineers design acceleration profiles for elevators, trains, and robots to achieve desired motion identities, such as smooth and comfortable, or quick and responsive. In society and history, the spread of ideas and innovations often follows a familiar S shaped curve: slow at first, then rapid growth, then saturation. This adoption curve is a motion identity of cultural change. Human migrations, such as the peopling of different continents, are large scale motion identities of entire populations. You can train yourself to read propagation identity in the world. Watch a simple pendulum swinging back and forth. Instead of seeing just the weight moving, try to notice the full pattern of its motion. It moves fastest in the middle and slowest at the turning points. The acceleration is directed toward the center, and its magnitude is greatest at the extremes. This pattern, repeated again and again, is the motion identity called simple harmonic motion. It appears in pendulums, springs, small oscillations of many systems. Listen to a train leaving a station. The sound rises in pitch and volume in a specific way as the train accelerates. Your ears are hearing the motion identity of the train's engines, turning fuel tallies into increasing velocity. On a windy day, watch leaves swirling in the air. Each leaf traces a chaotic-looking path, but together they reveal the motion identity of the turbulent wind, a complex but structured dance of eddies and gusts. You can also perform a very simple experiment. Throw a ball straight up and catch it. Pay attention to the whole journey. It leaves your hand fast, slows down as it climbs, pauses for a moment at the top, then speeds up again as it falls back into your hand. You know this pattern so well that you can catch the ball without thinking. Now, throw the ball forward in an arc. The journey becomes a parabola through space. In both cases, you are creating and witnessing a motion identity. The ball is temporarily a projectile under gravity, following the grammar of constant acceleration. We have now reached a pivotal viewpoint in our climb. We have explored the three pillars of how the holophase language creates stable identities, through time, in space, and in motion. Remember, the entire language is the single, ever-changing field phi, and the infinite, interconnected tree of derivatives that describe how it changes. In Ep.7, we have ascended from the root into the branches where this language speaks its most persistent words, the things that last, hold form, and travel. We are now ready to see how these three pillars are bound together by deeper stability rules in the language itself. As we always do, we return to phi. Propagation identity shows us how dynamic engagement with the world emerges from this one field. It is not an extra property glued onto objects. It is a specific and stable way that a phi pattern carries its own structure along a path. A stable motion pattern is like a current in a river. The water molecules change, but the current keeps its general direction and strength. In the same way, phi patterns can form currents in the field whose motion identity persists even as the underlying details change. The holophase language provides the grammar that decides which currents are stable and which ones quickly dissolve into randomness. The persistent ones are what we call trajectories, orbits, propagation modes, and flows. With a clear understanding now of identity's temporal thread, its spatial thread, and its motion thread, we have all the ingredients we need. Our next step is to understand the loom that weaves them into a single tapestry of stability. Before we finish, I want to gently remind you where we are in the larger climb of this language. We began with one symbol, phi, the single cyclic field. We then met its first derivatives, omega, k, and v, and saw how these three letters give birth, all at once, to time, space, and motion. From there, we climbed into nuance towers, learning how each dimension acquires texture and detail through higher derivatives. In this episode, we moved into the identity tower, asking when these patterns become stable enough to be called things. Temporal identity showed us the rhythm of persistence. Spatial identity showed us the sculpture of form. Propagation identity now shows us the journey that carries both through the world. Step by step, we are learning to see every object, every process, and even ourselves as sentences written in the master tree of phase and its derivatives. A universal language that can, in principle, describe the entire universe. With each part, the view widens, and your fluency in this silent cosmic language quietly, steadily grows within you. As we close this part, Let one final image settle in you. The cosmos is not a museum of static objects. It is a symphony of characteristic journeys. Every so-called thing is also a verb in motion, a story of travel. The vast elliptical journey of a star around the galactic center, the jittering journey of an electron in an atom, the creeping journey of a continent across the globe, the unfolding journey of a living body from birth to maturity to decay. You are a confluence of countless such journeys, from the circulation of your blood to the propagation of signals in your nerves to the arc of your life story. Your sense of agency and movement in the world is your mind's experience of this vast, coordinated propagation identity that is you. To understand propagation identity is to understand that to be is to be en route. To persist is to follow a characteristic path. And to live is to be a specific kind of journey unfolding in the holophase field. Now move through the world and feel your own motion, your walking, your breathing, your pulse. You are beginning to feel the universe expressing itself as action through you as one of its many moving stories. Peace be upon you.